Scientific American 1845 for the months of September and October. Here's a few more interest pieces that I have found that are pretty compelling. There are said to be about 14 million of the white population of the United States employed in agriculture and only 500,000 in mechanics and manufacturing. This would be 1845. Malleable glass. An invention is announced in some of the European papers as having been exhibited at Saint Etienne, and by which a pure transparent glass is produced, which is susceptible of being bent in any form while cold without breaking. This production is called silicone, and it appears likely to prove an invaluable acquisition to the arts and trades. Wonders of the iron manufactory. The amount of iron produced in the United States is 300,000 tons, all of which and much more is consumed in this country. The amount of nails alone is supposed to be 50,000 tons. 40,000 casks of 4 million pounds are annually made by the Boston Company. Suppose that the nails will average 160 to a pound. The number here produced each working day would be nearly 2 millions. This is supposed to be but the 25th part of the nail manufacture of the United States. It seems incredible that about 50 millions of nails are made, bought, and sold and used every day in the United States. Yet such appears to be the fact. Progress of improvement. Before the War of 1815, the only canals in the United States were the Middlesex Canal in Massachusetts, 27 miles in length, and finished in 1808, and the Santenay Canal in South Carolina, 22 miles in length. The canals now completed have cost upwards of $100 million. In 1683, there belonged to the city of New York 3 barks, 3 brigantines, 26 sloops, and 48 open boats. In 1769, the imports were 138,976 sterling and $839,782. And in 1799, the exports were $17,262,729. I'm drawing attention to these details because it seems that in 1845, the United States was a manufacturing giant. It was growing in construction, spreading out, building cities, railroads. United States was the fastest growing civilization in the world. At Haverhill, Massachusetts, 1,180,000 pairs of shoes were manufactured last season, for the making of which 250,000 were paid to the workmen. The present Pope, Gregory the 16th, is now in his 80th year and much afflicted with a cancer in his face. He was elected in 1831. A brilliant meteor was lately seen from various places in the eastern states in open daylight. It had a fiery appearance resembling lightning. A.M. Longworth of Cincinnati has a vineyard from which he expects to make 500 barrels of wine the present season. Chinese silk cotton of a fine glossy appearance and remarkable strength is said to be successfully cultivated in Louisiana, and I can see why in 1845 this would have been a big deal, as silk has always been a rarity. The steamer Massachusetts came in one morning last week freighted with 900 passengers. A great floating congregation. Excellent beds of chalk have lately been discovered in the northwest portion of Arkansas, the first and only discovery of the kind in the U.S. In fact, it was a bone of contention with other Western powers, the UK, France, Germany, European countries. They had often complained that in North America alone, the spreading of the United States was guaranteeing this new fledgling country access to natural resources that far exceeded all of Europe combined. 10,000 persons are said to be now employed in working the copper mines on Lake Superior. The price of sense must fall. Very interesting here is these copper mines are unique in the world. The copper has been strip mined out of the area. It's left a lot of tools and hammers and chisels from 1687 BC, the Ogygian deluge disaster. This is one of those sites. But even since then, the Cahokia Mound civilization, the mound builders, they had gotten their copper here as well. This place is ancient, and different civilizations at different time periods have all been around Lake Superior mining this copper, which was originally found lying right on the surface. It's very interesting. William Cordes goes into this. Barry Fell of America BC talks about it. It's a very unique area. There are 1,400 newspapers printed in the United States, giving employment to 12,000 hands. Of this number, 240 of these newspapers are printed in the state of New York alone. All right, guys, remember, New York City, it's been captured for a very long time. These publishing houses are where they first started. This is the origin of the media, the takeover of Hollywood and all that. The late arrivals from China confirm the agreeable intelligence previously received that the emperor has revoked the edict against the Christian religion. It is stated that more than 600 children attend public schools in Chicago, Illinois. This circumstance derives interest from the fact that Chicago itself is but a child of tender age. So in 1845, we have an admission here from a local newspaper that was basically nationalized, Scientific American, that the city of Chicago, Illinois, was very, very young compared to other American cities. I'm only drawing attention to this because I don't know if it's true or not. Some people say Chicago was there a lot longer, and there's a lot of people making much ado about it. But according to this paper in 1845, that's not true. Recent intelligence from Captain Fremont's expedition west of the Rocky Mountains speaks of magnificent forests of cedars, some of which measured 28 feet in circumference and tall in proportion. Yes, this would have been news. 1845, the West had not really been. 1849 is what really flooded the West in search for gold. The gold miners, you've heard the 49ers and all that. This would have been the California gold rush and the rush of the Yukon area. So, a balloon lately ascended from King's Road near London with 8 gentlemen and 2 ladies. They were in the air about 2 hours and at one time were 6,000 feet above the ground. This is 1845, describing a hot air balloon, and I draw attention to this because it was in the 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s where there was a lot of dirigible sightings and activity. And we are told in some sources have basically claimed that these are false. We didn't have these balloons back then. These things weren't going on. Martin Leakey has absolutely shown pictures from the 1800s of dirigibles, and even dirigibles that were using some type of weapon against people in constructions on the ground. So here's an admission from a periodical in Scientific American, 1845, that they were already doing successful balloon flights. So some of these sightings probably were true. The number of slaves in the world is estimated at 6,650,000, of which number nearly 1/2 are in the land of liberty, the United States. Here's a publication from 1845 admitting that the United States was absolutely packed full of slaves. Several dark spots have recently appeared on the sun. One of them has been measured and found to be 15,000 miles in diameter, another 6,000 miles. The state of astronomy in those days was very iffy, so I would not take this to heart. Those sunspots could have been any diameter. The number of passengers between New York and Boston on all the principal routes during the month of July was 18,169, exclusive of way passengers. That's really interesting, guys. The tracks were just being laid all over the place. This is basically describing a train going from New York to Boston, and it was 18,169 passengers during the month of July. This is progress. Several Jews in Cincinnati have been fined $3 each for working on Saturday. That is right, although the circumstance is without precedent in this country. Okay, so locals thought it was wise to punish Jews who were working on Saturday, the Sabbath, because Saturday was like holy, even in the United States, very Christian, puritanical. There were laws against it. But there is an admission here that these laws were not really enforced until this was done. The express train of cars on the Northern and Eastern Railroad, England, averages 27 tons, and its average speed is 45 miles per hour. The Great Western Express runs 42 miles per hour with 76 tons. Again, this is evidence of progress, exponential progress, the ability to move freight and people at great speeds across long distances. And as you can see here in this ad from 1845, that umbrellas have changed very little at all in the past 179 years. And of course, this ad doesn't tell us the invention of the umbrella, so they're probably much older than that. Of 203 prisoners in the Auburn State Prison, all but one have confessed that they had been addicted to drunkenness. The receipts at the patent office last month were about $5,000. The inventive genius of America is wide awake, and that is true. At this point in American history, the United States was virtually exploding with ideas. A variety of inscriptions and other curious antiquities from ancient Nineveh, this is Assyria, have recently arrived in France for the government. They will tend to confirm the authenticity of the scriptures on the subject of that ancient city. This is the library of Ashurbanipal of Assyria. At this point, cuneiform had not yet been fully translated. Lions in Texas. The Texas News of the 11th says that 3 large lions have lately been seen in Brazoria County. One of them was killed, weighing 450 pounds. They resemble the African lion, both in size and color. 1845, there were lions in Texas. This piece here begins a series on Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. Mammoth Cave has 28 miles of caverns and underground lakes and reservoirs, springs, geysers. It's full of all kinds of huge chambers and vaults. And the reason I'm drawing attention to it here is because later on in Mammoth Cave, over the years, as they were going through, they found whole mummies of red-haired, just mummified 7, 8, and 9 foot tall giants with 6 fingers and 6 toes. This was Mammoth Cave, Kentucky. Here's a really interesting piece. Well done, Dixon. Some of the Southern papers appear to be seriously alarmed in consequence of the terrible representation in the New York Packet concerning a diabolical conspiracy against the peace of the South. The fact is, the article alluded to is a sheer burlesque on the cracked up galvanic rings. Okay, I don't know what that means, but I do know this. Listen, guys, it was already understood in the South at this time that there was a conspiracy being hatched against them from the North, and they're pinpointing New York as the origin of that conspiracy. This leads to the genocide that happened in the War of Northern Aggression. The South wasn't wrong. There was a conspiracy, but they were made to look like conspiracy theorists in 1845. We could actually rename that war. It was called the War of Northern Aggression. Later, the historical redactors called it the Civil War, although it was actually a genocide. So we could actually rename it the War of the Moneylenders. I wonder if this refers to Rikers Island. The number of commitments at the city prison in New York has lately increased from an average of 140 to nearly 260 per day, frequently more than the prison will accommodate. Scientific American 1845 citing the Globe, which says an improved fire engine has lately been discovered in this city. It must be one of those that got lost in the mud in Broadway last spring. Interesting. I don't know what it means by a new type of fire engine has been discovered, and I'm not sure what the reference to mud in spring is either. 70,000 children under 16 years of age are employed in the various manufactories in France. None are allowed to work under 8 years of age. The Philadelphia papers speak of a gentleman now residing in Washington who is 7 feet high and weighs 308 pounds. An old soldier in the British Army has recently declared that he had never heard of the defeat of the British at New Orleans. This shows the general ignorance of the British soldiery. Okay, I do have a friend of mine who recently told me that the British English history in school doesn't teach anything about the American Revolutionary War. More big bones. The Madison Banner states on the most reliable authority that a discovery has been made in Franklin County, Tennessee, which is vastly more interesting than those of the great Mastodon and Hydrorgos combined. It consists of a complete human skeleton 18 feet in length. The public are ready to suspect this to be either a hoax or a deception, that the bones are either not found or are artificial. But it is gravely stated that they have been examined by the principal members of the medical faculty of Nashville and pronounced unequivocally the skeleton of a man. The finder, it is stated, has been offered but refused $8,000 for the bones. If the report is true, we shall soon hear ample confirmation. Here's a cool illustration. The Wild Man of the Mountains. The piece attached to it, I read it. It was basically about how some of these Native Americans had taken to the mountains and the Rockies and had become wild men, and they were harassing wagon trains and stuff like that. It's really interesting, showing that they had outsmarted the white man and found a new way to live. And it's a pretty interesting piece. The Emancipated Slaves. Judge Lay, John Randolph's executor, is endeavoring to find a location for the slaves manumitted by the will of the eccentric man. A legacy of $25,000 is left to them. That's the slaves. They do not wish to go to Liberia. This would be Africa, Monrovia. And they cannot remain in Virginia, which is a slave state. Judge Lay is seeking a place in a free state where they may be placed without danger of molestation from invidious laws or a still more invidious public feeling. I isolated this one for you guys because it shows the spirit of America awakening. Many people were treating their slaves very well. They were freeing them. This guy left them a hell of an estate. And here is a judge even trying to execute the estate according to the will. This behavior is further a window into the moral fabric of the United States. The United States at this time was a very ethical entity, a collection of people who were ruled by laws. And I just find it very interesting that people went out of their way to make sure that the laws of the state were abided by, even in the freeing of slaves by a will, giving them $25,000 and relocating them to another state. A private library was lately sold in England for $85,900. The sale occupied 62 days. The library had been the property of the Duke of Sussex. I am so jealous. Here's the concept piece that was drawn in 1845, Scientific American, of a horseless carriage. The method of propulsion would have been a steam engine that would have been made small enough. Now, this was the origin of the idea of the automobile. A little great curiosity. A full-grown deer, only 8 inches high, has been brought to England from Java. It is of the species called mouse deer, is perfectly domesticated, and is a very interesting animal. It is the only one in England. An exchange says that in 1609, the population of New York was only 4,300 people. 50 years earlier, it was probably less than that. That's quite obvious. Cassius M. Clay, whose printing establishment was broken up by a mob at Lexington, has resumed the printing of the True American at Cincinnati. Cassius Clay. It is anticipated that when the Hudson River Railroad is completed, a trip from this city to Montreal may be made in 15 hours. A Texas gentleman now in Europe writes that a colony of 15,000 Swiss are preparing to leave their country and settle in Texas this fall. First printer in America. The first printer in North America was Samuel Green. The press he used was procured by Reverend Joseph Glover, who died in 1638 on his voyage to Massachusetts. The Freeman's Oath was the first thing printed in 1639. The next, an almanac for New England, made by one Pierce, a mariner. And the third, the New England version of the Psalms in 1640. Green afterwards printed Eliot's Bible and the laws of Massachusetts, Plymouth, and Connecticut. As the United States exploded around 1845 in manufacturing and agriculture, in literacy and in population, we see more and more in these windows of the past how the United States was destined for great things, and that many things were going on in the 1800s, and that many of the mysteries for which we have attributed may not be mysterious at all, especially since I've been going through the almanacs and I've been finding how many cities were destroyed by fire over and over and over and rebuilt over and over and over. 1800s was a period of excessive growth. People from all over the world were coming here fast. Cities were disappearing just as fast as they were being built. This is just another window. I hope you got into the past that I hope you guys enjoyed. We got many more to come from many different types of publications from America's past and Europe's past. You guys know when I find these periodicals, I like to share them.